Welcome back on the AM show. Now, before we get into depression, let me tell you about H2 Solutions, an elite comprehensive IT solutions company in West Africa that provides numerous service-led solutions to corporations, both locally and regionally, by bridging legacy offerings and emerging services focused on new technology, new delivery models, and new architecture to mid-sized and enterprise businesses. As PMI authorized training partners, we're organizing a project management certificate course for the general public. And the relevant dates, 24th May to the 4th of June, 2021. It's going to be online, so your safety is guaranteed. 3 hours per day, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. GMT. It was going for $800 US. It now is going for $400 US. And the key benefits, you get to earn 35 PDO contact hours plus a certificate. You complete your project management professional certification training. You get class materials and tools to equip you as a PMP experienced instructor. Now, for registration and inquiries, just reach out and note this, info@h2safrica.com. Now, the 2 is actually the number 2. So info@h2safrica.com. The website, www.h2safrica.com. You can reach out to Florence on 0556 757 549 0556 757 549 to register. You can also reach out to Jephthah on 0556 647 705 0556 647 705. But let's talk depression now. And across the world, many people, in fact, over 800,000 of those aged between 15 and 29 lose their lives on the back of depression. What exactly is the tale, especially in Ghana, now that we hear that a lot of people are committing suicide? Well, let's delve into the details. And according to the United Nations, as you can see, depression is a common illness worldwide, with more than 264 million people affected. And it gets even more gory when you look at the picture. Depression is a leading cause of disability worldwide and is a major contributing factor to the overall global burden of disease. That's just how serious the matter really is. Now, interestingly, more women are affected by depression than men. In fact, in Ghana's own context, about 5.1% of those depressed are men and over 8.5% are women. So you see that it reflects even here in Ghana. At its worst, depression can lead to what has now become commonplace across the world and is becoming commonplace in Ghana: suicide. Close to 800,000 people, as I indicated, die due to suicide every year. And even more worrying, between 76% and 85% of people in low and middle income countries receive no treatment for their disorder. So you're suffering from depression in a place like Ghana. Where exactly do you know? Are people aware of where exactly they can get help? Psychiatric help is demonized, stigmatized in certain ways. But do we even have enough of those who are qualified professionals to deliver the help? That is a question that we ought to look at. 1 in 6 people are aged between 10 and 19, and they are depressed. So you can understand why we're seeing more and more very young people who are doing so many things, some of them going to the extent of committing suicide. Also, something to take note of: mental health conditions account for 16% of the global burden of disease and injury in people aged 10 to 19 years. 16%. That's no mean number. Half of all mental health conditions start by 14 years of age, but most cases are undetected and untreated, which also calls on parents especially to notice more when it comes to children. And if you're thinking, oh, they don't have that much of a burden, economic burden, they are not fending for themselves and all of that, take note, 14 is when it usually starts. So no one is too young to get depressed. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death in 15 to 19-year-olds, as I indicated earlier. And in countries of all income levels, people who are depressed are often not correctly diagnosed, and others who do not have the disorder are too often misdiagnosed and prescribed antidepressants. That in itself is a worry of its own. So there you have it when it comes to some of these statistics when it comes to depression. But how exactly do we stem the tide of this? How do we get past this situation? So we have Seth Asafo, who is a clinical psychologist, and he's going to be helping us understand some of the dynamics when it comes to dealing with depression, dealing with the likes of suicide. So, Seth, a very good morning to you. Thank you for making time to join us on the AM show.
Having me.
Okay, so let's start from here. When it comes to depression, basically, I'd like you to walk us through what exactly is depression. Explain it for us, because I'm sure some people might be thinking, what are the signs, what are the symptoms, what do I see to think, oh, I am depressed? What is depression?
Okay, so depression is a psychological disorder that affects mood. So when you talk about psychological disorders, we have those that affect thinking. And so typically what you see on the street are people who they've lost a part of their thinking, or that it's been impaired or is not functioning as it should. Now, depression affects feelings. Okay, so it affects the way we feel, together with other psychological disorders that also affect feelings. So being excessively afraid, that's an emotional thing, and it affects feeling. Now, in depression, the most significant things that you'll find is a very low mood. So a person has a very low mood or a pessimistic outlook of life. They are not able to enjoy things that perhaps they previously enjoyed. They basically believe that they're hopeless, they're worthless, things will never change, and life, of course, has no meaning. So it's a very persistent low mood consistently that people have, that affects their motivation to do things, etc., etc. So in summary, that's what the depression is. It affects your mood, the way you feel about yourself and circumstances around you.
Okay, so this is quite a wide range, because then I'm sure people have so many things to look at when it comes to depression, so many things to consider. In fact, this affects 264 million people globally. So it's quite a wide range. But if you had to narrow it down and say, look, if you see these things, you must seek help when it comes to depression, what would you say? If you had to just put it down to, bring it down to 1, 2, 3 things to observe, what would they be?
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that you need to look for is a sudden change in mood, okay, sudden change. Let's not forget that sometimes there are people who are naturally reserved, and that by no way means that they're depressed, no. But if you notice a sudden change in someone where perhaps the way they used to be someone who used to be maybe very outgoing, very happy, enjoyed activities, and then they suddenly are not able to enjoy these activities. So I like to go to church. Now I don't want to go to church. 1, because I don't enjoy it anymore, and 2, because I don't have the motivation to do it. Okay, so that's one angle. Excessive fatigue. So there's a sense of fatigue where you're so tired every single day, and it's not because you haven't had enough rest, but you actually have had enough rest, but you're excessively fatigued, and there's no energy in you. Now, you also notice that they start to withdraw very significantly from other people. 1, because it becomes laborious to have to be in the presence of other people, and 2, also because they feel burdened by other people saying, why are you so different? You've changed. You are not the same person you used to be. Now, these people internally are already struggling to get themselves back. And you see, for a lot of people, when they start to feel depressed, they recognize that something is wrong, but they can't do anything about it. And that's the painful part. In our experience, a lot of the times, they have been looked at as you are lazy or you're looking for attention, etc., etc., especially when you look at women right after birth in the postpartum depression syndromes. And they things are made even worse for them when it seems like they're seeking attention. So that also is there. Now, you may also notice changes in their sleep patterns. It's either they are oversleeping, so they sleep they can't wake up. And that's also tied back to the loss of energy, or that they're sleeping very little. Sometimes also you experience it in their appetite. So is that it's either they are eating too much as a coping mechanism, because when you eat, there's some form of euphoria that you experience. So they eat to sort of drown their pain, that mood pain they have, or they are not able to eat at all because of the mood in which they are. Now, some people may also start to have feelings of worthlessness. So regardless of who they are and their status in society, they lose track of that. You'll be surprised to know that there are professors and doctors and lawyers and lawmakers who actually are depressed and don't feel any value in themselves. So they lose that side, and it makes it even more difficult. Now, these things also makes them isolate more, because when they see other people and they see the way these people have the energy to do things that they do, it only makes them more inferior. And when they withdraw, people also get tired of them and allow them to isolate even more, which is the dangerous part when it comes to depression. Now, in some instances, a depression could lead to a more significant form, which we say depression with psychosis. So the person, together with the low mood, will also experience some alterations in their perception. For example, they may start to see things that are not there, we call hallucinations, or they may hear voices that do not exist, or they may feel things crawling around them that do not exist. And that's a more severe form, like it's a variation of the depression. So if you notice any of these signs, it's something that is of concern, and you may want to start getting help for such a person.
Okay, so I just wanted to sneak in this bit. Are there other disorders that sometimes feed into depression? I'm thinking, for example, since you're talking about mood, people with bipolar disorder, for example, how much of an impact can that have on depression? Or can that even be a factor in someone having depression?
So the reality of bipolar is just an alternating of mood between depression and what we call mania, or extreme euphoria or happiness. So it is a necessary condition even to diagnose depression. Now, you see, interestingly, for most people that have a bipolar, we are able to, or many people will get them to ask for help in the depressive state, because in the manic state of the euphoria, they feel there's so much energy. They can go out, they do lots of things that make them happy. And sometimes you might notice that it's a bit much, but they don't notice it as much. So a bipolar and a depression are just they're in the same family, really.
I see. So that is some very good education there. That means they actually alternate between depression and maybe mania, as you mentioned.
Yes.
But do explain. Looking at the statistics, it is rather scary. About 800,000 people committing suicide on the back of depression. So many millions more, 240 million actually affected when it comes to depression globally. But something interesting I found in the statistics is that more women are affected in most parts of the world. Even here in Ghana, it is same, 8% plus women compared to 5.1% men. Is there any explanation for that? Are there any things that our women are exposed to that makes them more susceptible to depression?
Well, so the researches are inconclusive on that. Now, some researchers have explained from the perspective that naturally, women, as a result of their biochemistry and genetic makeup, are more emotional than men. So they oscillate more towards the feeling component, whilst men oscillate more towards the thinking component, or more logical. So I mean, you see, sometimes you might look at a simple scenario and the person says, "I feel," but that feeling has gone on to become a fact. And it's just a feeling. So that distinction is quite difficult from the researchers in women. And that may account for why these feelings can do that. Now, if you look at the way that logic works, if I fail, I can obviously understand that, yes, failure might be temporary. But when I feel that I have failed, they are two very different things. To think that you have failed and to feel that you have failed are two very different things. And the feeling, of course, engulfs us. I mean, practically look at it this way. Someone says, I love somebody. I feel so much love for the person. And they are doing all these things to me, but I cannot move on. That is a feeling. If it were just limited to thinking, you would make sense very quickly and say, this is nonsense. Why should I keep on being in this scope? So that's one of the most significant schools of thought on why it affects women more. I mean, we are also arguing the point that many men will not talk about their depression. In fact, they will not report themselves. The statistics will also show you that a lot more men that report to general healthcare settings, okay, will have a psychological issue that is manifesting in a physical condition. So many men are less likely to go to a clinic or a professional because they have some form of psychological challenge. They will only when it manifests in physical ways. And that I get several relations to the way that we've been socialized as men to express all these emotions that show courage and bravery, etc. So hardly would men say that. So I would say it's possible that it exists almost fairly equally, but underreporting may make it more difficult to diagnose. For the statistics to say that men are experiencing it equally to women.
Now, how would you explain this in your practice? Globally, per UN data, we're told that 1 in 6 youth aged between 10 and 19 years actually suffer some form of depression. And in recent times, we've seen a number of our youth, taking their lives and all of that. How would you explain it? Is it that the youth of today are emotionally bombarded with too many things? So what could explain this?
So from a clinical psychological point of view, and also from experience in practicing, what I have noticed is a lot of the youth today have a very limited threshold for dealing with stress. And when I talk about stress, I mean everything that encompasses things that we consider as overwhelming. I mean, you'll be interested to know that I had a 14-year-old child who was under a lot of, she said her life is terrible, and it was because her air conditioning wasn't working. Now, we might look at this and trivialize it, but really, that is her feeling. And it's because of the experiences that she's had. Now, if you look at the history of the kinds of things that other people might have gone through, there's something we call resilience. That's what you build when you've gone through several challenges. In modern times, this drive of resilience, because many people are not allowed, especially when it comes to the youth, overprotection prevents children from being able to experience challenges and to deal with them themselves. In many cases, we rally up very quickly and solve the problems for the child. And so they are not able to process past a challenge. So in my perspective, it is because they are not allowed to deal with their own challenges. The challenge seems so overwhelming. I mean, take it this way. There are people who have had 1 heartbreak, 2 heartbreaks, 3 heartbreaks. They build a resilience, and therefore now, even when they have a heartbreak, it's not as bad as it was in the first time. So the general idea of facing challenges teaches us problem-solving skills and gives us a sense of accomplishment, which is imbibed into our self-esteem, that I am capable to do this even when there's a challenge. So in many cases, when you look at depression, when you look at suicide, you'll notice that it is a feeling of I cannot do this anymore, or I'm incapable of doing it. And so people live the feeling without looking at the facts.
So very interesting point you make there, Mr. Asafo. So basically, overprotectiveness in itself can also shield the youth from the sort of hard experiences they may need to build a certain, thick skin. And when they don't have that, they are easily susceptible to depression. That's a very important point you make there, and one that parents ought to take stock of. Let me just announce at this point in time that you can also reach out to us and join the discussion. Do you feel you have depression? Do you feel, listening to Mr. Asafo, that maybe, just maybe, your children, your wards could be depressed. You can call 0302-211-961 extension 2 and share with us. 0302-211-961 extension 2. The number will be rolling on your screen. But coming back to you, Mr. Asafo, looking at the dynamics as we see it, again, I want us to look at the global dynamics. Sometimes we don't have all the statistics in Ghana. Suicide is the leading cause of death of youth aged between 15 and 19 years. And we're told that 800,000 people every year actually succumb to suicide, which is, again, a leading cause of death globally. What do we do as parents, as teachers, as people in media, as clinical psychologists, as psychiatrists, to reach out to especially the youth in this age bracket to stem the tide of this? What do you think can be done?
Okay, so like with many mental health conditions, being able to identify it earlier on allows for interventions to be staged also very quickly. So I think that there are a number of signs and things that parents and the society out there need to pick regarding specific people who might be at risk. So we know that poverty is a very significant risk factor for many mental health conditions. One, because the poverty in itself brings about more stresses that predispose people to have challenges. And secondly, also in accessing the care, being poor makes it extra difficult. So I talked about some signs that you notice in a depression. Now, one thing that is very important for everyone to know is when people are going through challenges, let's not always use our life experiences as the yardstick to measure it. And among a lot of the clients I have who are in the adolescent ages, one thing they say significantly is nobody understands me. Because when they talk about, I have a low energy, I cannot go to school, or I don't feel like studying, or I feel like I will fail, the first thing that people are inclined to say is, you do it, don't be lazy, you can do it. Of course, they're trying to motivate. Unfortunately, that kind of motivation only puts more pressure on the person who's experiencing the challenge. Now, what I normally encourage people to do is to say, I'm available for you. I know that this is difficult, but we can work through it together. So you're making the person feel that you understand them. And in understanding them, they can pour out more and more of the information for you. Now, we also need to do a lot of education on these things so that the society can pick it up in people and not feel that. So one very risky thing in a depression, obviously, is other people feeling that the person's behavior has changed. They become obnoxious, or the word too known, because they don't want to hang out with everybody. And then they also isolate because they are angry. Now, these things would fuel the feeling of loneliness within the person. And then they start to feel like even if they were gone, nobody would notice because they become very insignificant. So all these things push deeper and deeper into the feeling of wanting to do this. Now, it's also important that they enforce it's been done already where mental health services have been incorporated into primary health care. So before, where mental health services were delivered primarily through the psychiatric hospitals, it's been modified, and that is it's greatly improving the stigma that people are. It's reduced the stigma because it's now in the general healthcare, not saying that I'm going to Accra Mental. Finally, just yesterday, Dr. Bannon, who's the medical director for Panta, he made mention of a very important factor of how mental health care is expensive. Unfortunately, the National Health Insurance does not incorporate mental health care into its policy. So majority of people who have challenges like this are not able to get the help because it's very expensive. I mean, you're seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist on a weekly basis, and you have to pay all from your pocket, which means that as you do this, if you run out of the funds, you deteriorate even more. So it becomes important for governmental policies to also ensure that this can be something that's funded by the national insurance scheme. So it makes it easier for people to access the help. Let's not forget, some people may note signs, but they're also worried about, even though we have the signs, who do we go to? We don't have the money, and so they'll stay back.
Let's just hold it there. Whom do we go to? We have Georgina connecting with us from Cape Coast. Georgina, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to hear from you. What are your thoughts to share on depression as far as the conversation we're having is concerned?
I just want to ask a question.
Georgina, please go ahead.
Okay. Can you please share with us the possible solution if one feels he or she is depressed?
Okay. So that is one question there. What are the possible solutions if you feel depressed? Seth will answer that shortly. But let's take Mike from WA.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, sir.
Great. So what are your concerns as far as depression is concerned? Do you feel depressed?
Okay. I'm just from school. That is London Senior High School.
Right. Please go on, Mike.
I don't know whether it's because of the exams or when I'm to learn, I'm not always feeling myself again. So I said, let me come and see if I can have a prudent attention. And luckily on my path, I came and I was watching the program, and my good brother was giving the suggestion. So sometimes, as he narrated earlier on, all of a sudden, I'm not always myself again. I'm not always feeling happy again. Then I want him to tell me the procedures to follow. If it is the exams, how I'll be able to go through it, and also how I will always be able to feel myself again to be happy. Because as he said earlier on, I always see myself not coming out with it anymore. So thinking my life will be the happiest part. So I want my good brother there to give me one way or ways to move through it. And I believe God being so good, it will come to this too shall pass.
Mike, thank you so much for calling, but please don't take your life, not over examinations. Seth will speak to you shortly. Let's take Godwin from Sunyani. This will be our last call. Godwin?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Please go ahead and contribute.
Okay. So, the statistics shows that a lot of children, and for the children, a lot of girls, and I've had a chance to teach in a girls' school, and I realized that most of them come to school with a lot of baggage, sometimes from the house. The pressure from the house sometimes it's a lot. Yeah, because I remember one of my best students in the class, their grades were going down, just down. And I made a funny comment. Then one day, he took my bag, he put a letter inside. When I came to the house, I opened my bag and I saw the letter. And this girl was depressed. I realized that most of the time, when he gets to the house, the father is very domineering, controls a lot. The father was abusing the mother. He had a little girl. There was no money in the house. All these things. And because of that, the grades were going down. So I am just suggesting that why don't we get psychologists, even find them. They come to read the teachers, especially the male teachers. So why don't we get psychologists in the schools that will help these, especially in the girls' schools, because most of them, it comes with the girls.
Okay. Very, very pertinent, concerns that you've actually shared. So let's quickly do this. We'll have Seth answer give some responses to some of these concerns. So we have Georgina from Cape Coast who is saying that, what are the solutions available? Look, someone is bereaved, is feeling depressed. Someone doesn't have a job on the back of what we've seen. COVID is making his or her life bad. How does the person find solutions? What is your take, Seth?
Thank you. Let's make a quick distinction. There's nothing wrong with being sad from experiencing a significant life event. So if you're bereaved and you're sad, that is very normal. Every human being should go through that process of grieving. Now, it is when it comes to the treatment of many mental health conditions, there are significantly two approaches. The pharmacologic one, which has to do with medications, etc. And then that has to do with psychotherapy, which is usually talk therapy. Let's remember one thing. The brain reflects what we're thinking, okay? And it responds to the thought of what you're thinking. If I fail an exam and then I say I am a failure, the brain responds to it by accepting that I am a failure. It makes it extra difficult for me to initiate other things because it would say, why try? You are going to fail anyway. Now, it then
yes, you'll go through it as you've entered senior high school and all of that, but taking your life is not the solution. Take the bull by the horn and you'll be able to get through this. Now, when we return from the break, we'll talk about Hour of Grace with Pastor Constance A.B. Adako. It will be on Joy Prime every Saturday. We'll be telling you a lot more about it when we return.